Thank you everybody for joining us today on our Iowa Organic Association webinar. We are very excited to have Sree Nilakante from the Big Data in the Box team. He's going to be with us talking about record keeping and more specifically the application that they have made and are working on and continuing to upgrade and develop. And so we're going to hear more about that. We have heard from a lot of our organic farmers and those that are interested in transitioning to organic that this record keeping is one of the pinch points. It's one of the challenges that go along with it. So we are excited to be able to talk about that today. Look at what is available from Big Data in a Box to help along with that. Also, I just want you to be aware of a little bit about what the Iowa Organic Association is about. We are a statewide nonprofit organization that exists to walk alongside Iowa's organic farmers, consumers, supporters, businesses, and industry and help and connect and grow the organic movement in Iowa. So we do that through things like this webinar, of course. Last week we had a wonderful annual meeting where we talked about some of the great things that organic agriculture is doing in Iowa when it comes to water quality and soil health. That was just a wonderful time. So thank you if you were able to join us for that. We absolutely loved that. In the summer, we have farmer meetups, we have field days, hosting farmer to farmer education, and specifically, we also do outreach events like college visits. We table at other events where not only farmers are at and organic industry people, but consumers as well. We realize that part of growing organic in Iowa is growing knowledge about organic in Iowa. So we visit between 15 and 20 colleges and universities and high schools across the state each year talking about organic agriculture. We host at least 6 or more field days and farmer meetups throughout the year. And then coming up, you need to just watch your email inbox because we will have more winter webinars coming up this winter. So we are excited about that. We try to make sure that we are hitting everything from the consumer to the farmer to the processors when it comes to the education and support that we're doing for organic agriculture here in Iowa. So thank you all for joining us. As I may have mentioned, or you may have seen when you popped in, we are recording this webinar. So if you want to come back and see anything, or if you want to share that with anybody, it will be available later in the week to watch the recording. But with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow Sree to share his screen because he's got the bulk of the information today. And so we're excited to have one of our supporters, Big Data in the Box. They're one of our IOA supporters. So we're excited to have them sharing with us today. So Sree, go ahead, pop up your
All right.
screen.
Thank you. Let me share the screen here and get to. So again, good afternoon, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about record keeping. But before I go through with the actual application, I thought I would talk a little bit about the rationale for this particular approach of record keeping using digital tools or AI-enabled tools. As we see here that one of the things that we know for sure is records do really matter. It's in a way it really keeps track of what happened. So it's the farms of memory, and of course the season after season, you really have a ability to go back and look at the data and see where the trends are and what you need to do for the next season and so forth. And if you look at the kinds of records that as an organic farmer would like to or has to keep track of, there's at least 5 different things: seeds, seedlings, planting, stocks, and so on, planting and field activities, input materials, harvest, handling, and storage details, and of course, sales and transactions, the market side of it. So those are some of the few, at least the minimum set of records that you need to keep track of. And why? Well, number of reasons. It brings specifically these values to you. It reduces the cost. As long as you know where the inputs are and able to identify waste in your input areas and other operations and so on, then you that impacts on your cost. Having knowledge about the historical yields will help get to planting decisions, planning, crop rotation timings, and so on. So that could lead to better yields as in the future years. A real thing about all the data that you would have collected over the years is to come up with predictive insights. So that's where the historical records come into play. How you do that, there are a number of tools and methods available for it to do that. But clearly, that's one of the major advantages of having the data, rather than saying that my gut tells me this is what I need to do. Now you would have facts to support that. Uh, of course, if you can automate your record keeping activities, then that saves a lot of time and labor, and you don't need to worry about whether you did something and where is it, what happened to it, none of that. And as organic farmers, you're really focused on sustainability. You are the land stewards of the land. So how do you show that commitment towards that? So again, that information that you collected or have helps you understand that, hey, you are doing a pretty good job of sustaining stewardship of that land. And of course, the other part of it is that if you have the records that are properly maintained, then you can provide the traceability, especially if you're dealing with your customers, whether they are big customers or your CSA customers or whoever it is. So that really adds to the traceability part of it. So when you look at all of the data that you're bringing in, we are saying that each one of them. So the reason I thought I would use the gear analogy here is that everything is interconnected. You start with field records, collecting that, including the activity logs. So the first two are clearly data collection mechanisms, and the next two really goes into the processing of that information for financial uh, details, computing your expense, your revenue, and so on. And then, of course, if you're going into compliance, whether it is organic certification compliance or any type of compliance, then that helps too. So together, these four elements of your activities, your task, or your processes help boost profitability. So that's important to note that, right? So when you look at again to reinforce those ideas, these five, there are field operations data that you collect, planting dates, cultivation, pest management, then of course input tracking, all of the different inputs, seeds, approved materials, pesticides or approved pesticides, herbicides, and so on. And then harvest data, which is a big thing. You do really need to, by crop, by field, quality metrics, timing, who did what. So that's a lot of um, detailed records they need to keep track of those. Finally, of course, the financial records, the labor costs, who have you employed, how much time they put in together, and lastly, the documentation needed for certification. So these are some of the at least the five things you're keeping track of. Of course, you could do all of these, right? You could do all of these using traditional methods, which is what most people have been doing. There's no technology needed other than paper and pencil or a notebook where you can enter that information. And most of you are familiar with it because that's what you're comfortable with. But it can be quite time consuming because not only for recording it, but to organize it. You have to have a proper mechanism or a method or a process to do that. And of course, if there is any wear and tear or you drop it in a bucket of water, it's gone, especially if you wrote it in ink. It's all gone. Okay. And of course, you can't analyze pages and pages of that written information. So you do need to look towards some digital systems to do that because then it provides you quick data entry and automatic backups. It's easier to go through that information. You can sort it, you can query it, you can generate reports, you can share that information with other people, maybe your advisors, your bankers, your certifying agencies, and so on. And sometimes, of course, this requires some kind of a device, either a computer or a laptop or a tablet or some kind, or maybe it's connection to the internet so that you can use it from there. And to ensure that all of these would ensure that privacy and trust is still maintained. So if you're unsure about it, try a hybrid approach. Maybe certain things in paper, then transfer it back into the digital. That way you have one way to say that, hey, I know this is what I did. Now I can put it in here. And until you become familiar with it, when you can fully cut over to the digital approach. So that's possible. So uh, based on what we had seen is that you always start with simple steps. So maybe you start with the two or three critical steps. Maybe you're focusing only on the planting and inputs and maybe harvesting details and making it a routine. So if you have people working for you or interns or other ones, so let's have them do some of those things on a routine basis and keep some very simple templates and app that best work for you. So that will be the starting point of it. So rather than jumping into the full-fledged technology solution right away, which may turn you off because it can be quite challenging at best. Now, you often have heard things like, hey, AI is coming into everything agriculture. Where the heck is it coming into agriculture? There's a number of different ways in which it can. Of course, it can provide support. And people don't talk about the differences in the type of AI that really are valuable to a farmer. There is a predictive, and then there is something called a generative. So predictive is the one that we say, hey, if I have the data running back to, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, then I can use the data to do some analysis of it. So that helps me come up with some, what is a demand that I can predict? How do I know what the pricing structure is going to be? How do I optimize my pricing based on the cost of operations, that I can understand that? So it is, in the good old days at Iowa State, the statistics department came up because of these issues, right? To help farmers figure out what are the methods that they could use to help understand the data that they would have. So that's called predictive analytics, and they use all kinds of tools for that. Whereas the generative AI, which is what the most hype that you have these days, oh, it can tell you this, it can do this, it can do that. Well, it helps you in terms of telling your story. So how do you use the AI to kind of position your story so that you can convey that? You can use that generative AI to understand your overall market, which products, which crops will sell, which markets would be the most appropriate ones. So those are kind of the generative AI. You're looking at the general set of information that's out there that you can use to reformat what you need to know. So those are two different types of AI kind of things that you will come across as we go through our work here. So I would say the taking that very first step today, and in a sense, making sure that the record keeping is not really a burden. It's not. So starting with one small change a week, whether it's a field notebook or a simple spreadsheet or a mobile app or something, make sure that it is maintained. It starts small. And after all, the success that you can get is that you're maintaining a running memory of what you have done. So there are a number of resources available to you, just as Ethan mentioned, the organization, the Iowa Organic Group, various groups out there. So they are, or Iowa State's Extension Office, other training pieces out there. Maybe there are some YouTube videos out there. So a number of different sources out there to help you. But if you're ready to look at some of the digital tools, then I like to show you one of them that's out there. So let me get into that area. So, but before I do that, do you have any questions on anything that I know I went through a little quickly over the introductions to why you need record keeping, and also try to allay any fears that you may have heard about AI. So if that's not an issue,
Yeah,
then
I think
okay.
that's great, Sree. I will just mention again to everybody, there's both the Q&A box and the webinar chat, whichever one is easier for you. Pop your questions in there as we're going through. especially as, yeah, we get into kind of a description and working through what big data in the box has. So perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So let me take you to a simple, at this point, an early version of what we have been putting together as a way to help with record keeping. So we have something called Spider, which stands for actually a portable interactive data extraction reporting tool. Um, so generally what we have is that this application is you sign in with your email, which is actually a user ID, and with a password that you get when you register. And in this case, I'm going to use a very simple password, and I can log in, and it says, all right, so okay, I can save it, and it throws up a little splash screen out here. And what you get is a map of close to where you are. And if you type in the name of your farm, it'll try to locate that from addresses that are available, generally available in the Google sphere, I guess it's wherever it is that is known. So here I'm going to randomly, I went through and randomly chose a farm. So if that happens to be your farm, I'm sorry, I didn't get a permission from you to use that, but I'm going to use this called um, blueberry bottom. Oh, blueberry bottom farm in Brighton, Iowa. So as soon as I have half of it written, it says, okay, yeah, I know there is a unique one out there, and maybe there are a number of others, but the one that you want, you pick up that, and it takes you directly to that particular area. So that's a farm that you have on the side. Okay. So that may be your farm if you type in your farm name, and of course you have your farmhouses, your whatever details out there that you can zoom in if you want to. So that's my farm area. So and on the right hand side, I have a few things here that says choose a layout. So here it says what season are you trying to work on? So is it a spring 2025 or is it a fall 2025? Whatever it is that you have, or a summer coming up, summer season, spring season. So you can define a new season and create a new layout if that's what you want. So in this case, if I were to choose, let's say, a new season, um, like 2025, or in this case, the spring 2025 is what I have. And that's already, since it's already out there, so I don't need to create a new layout, but I could. So given that, I can now go and say, hey, where is my farm? What farm is it that I really want to be keeping track of? So a number of things here that I also want to kind of take your uh, attention here is on the left-hand side are some navigation features. We will get to that in a short while. But before that, let me expand this up here a little bit here and move it and say, hey, this is a as we know, this is Blueberry Farm. So these are all different blueberry fields that the farmer has. So how do I know it's a farm? So I can go in and draw point to point here and say, hey, I have a farm here, starting out here, 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 and that. So that may be one farm that um, maybe this is the blueberry farm. So maybe I would call it as blueberries farm. Okay. So I can define that, okay, that's a blueberry farm. I'm going to ignore the rest of it because it will take too much time otherwise to go through each piece of the field. Let's call it as a farm. I could have named the entire farm. For example, I could have gathered up the whole area defined by the fields and call it as a farm, but I chose just to use this for expediency. Okay. So now I have the farm out here, Blueberries Farm. And within this, I have a number of different options available now. So one is that I can, of course, these three dotted points says, either I can edit the title of that or delete it and start all over, or I can go in here and look to see what information I have already available in my system that I have gathered up. Maybe I have a notebook containing all the different entries corresponding to, let's say, the day's activities. Or maybe there is an invoice that I received from my supplier or from the place that I purchased my seeds and so on. So I have those in different formats that I can upload that. Or it could be an image that I have. For example, I may have a notebook where I have entered all of the information, but it's a handwritten document. So can I scan that in and then get it in? Or maybe I have an intern who was working through that field and who had some audio recording about the condition of that particular field or condition of the various blueberry plants. So I may have an audio recording of that. So I could upload any one of those three, or I could simply enter some comments associated with it saying that, hey, this is what I've done, or some type of a task list or something. Today I expected such and such. So we could do that. So that's one of the options. Or I can, while I'm at this, so as I'm showing you this, I'm showing you on a desktop. Okay. So I can also go into recording in a spoken word out here. So I'm going to show you one example of this by allowing for this to be captured. For example, um, let me upload a an image. And in this case, I'm going to use an image that I may have in my on my desktop. So I'm going to pull it up and look at, for example, here is I have a whole bunch of image files here. So I shall use one of these things. Let's see what that brings up. It says files uploaded successfully. And then it takes that image, which is a scanned image. We'll see the scanned image in a short while here. And that scanned image is going to be processed to convert that into a series of text. So maybe it's a notebook that contained all the entries, and those entries will then be converted into a series of text that we could use. So what it does right now is that it took that image and asked the appropriate AI system to go out and say, hey, do some analysis on it and tell me what it is about, first of all. So this is a handwritten document. Typically, that happens in any farm who have different types of products that they are growing or the crops that they're growing. And when they started, what is the area of that field? Any other information that you have, number of rows, I'm sorry, and any comments that it had and so forth, and when they applied some fertilizer and so on. So, and as it looked through, it said, well, based on what I have processed that, I also think that this contains some information about applications of pesticide. It's about crop care and also about planting. And that's what it converted this into a machine readable form. So generally, that's the information that we can do to continue taking these kinds of scanned images and convert them into data. So if I do that confirm and save, then I can put this away as a file that I can use later on. So that's one of the things that I would choose from that image part of it. Likewise, I may have a data that I wanted to bring in for this area. Maybe there is um, for that operation, I may want to bring in an audio file that I may have corresponding to that. So there is an audio recording that maybe an intern or somebody had made. So I can pull in that audio file, and it says it uploaded that audio, and it'll convert that audio and convert that into a transcript. And when it converts that into transcript, it will do exactly similar to what we had seen with the other image file. It identified what was the topic about. And in this case, it says it's all about planting. Okay? So you can also listen to that if you want to, that audio, so to make sure that it is what it is. And you can play that back.
You ready? Um, so we planted a bed of cabbage. The variety is Mammoth Red Rock.
So you can hear that and you can view through that. And also it allows you to see the transcript. So it didn't take too long to convert it into transcript. It took hardly 10 seconds. And it's about 99% accurate. There may be a few things here and there, but the level of technology has improved so much that you can almost bet that you will get 100% response, correct transformation. So again, you can say, hey, I'm fine with it. So let me save it, and that's saved as well. So now so these were recorded previously, right? You could also go back in here and say, hey, I'm in this farm and I want to record right away some of the things that I want to. So for that, I might say that, these have two different varieties of blueberries, let's say. So I may want to add a note here, say, allowing it to record. This recording is a simulation of the recording that happened on July 1st of the previous years. So what we see here is that there are two kinds of blueberry patches here, or blueberry varieties. One is a short growth, short season variety, and the next other one is more of a longer season, but multiple yield producing crop. Okay? So I'm not a good farmer, but this is what I think it could be doing. So I can upload that recording and it'll convert that into, with all the ums and ahs that I had in my audio. So it'll convert those to say, this recording is a simulation of the recording that happened on July 1st of the previous year. So what we see here is, of course, we can edit it once we say, hey, this is exactly what I said, and I can convert that, and I can fix it by saying, once I confirm and save it, I don't need this portion here. I can delete that. If I edit it, I can do the editing, so I can take that off. And yes, if you have some grammar control, it'll tell me my grammar is not quite right. That's okay. So I can fix that to some extent. One is short growth, multi-yielding, multiple yield producing. So fine, I can do with that. And it's all about planting. Okay. So that's also saved into that recording. So you can do that on a daily basis, whenever that happens, so you can keep track of what had happened. So now if I look at all of the files and logs that we have here, so what we currently have is that today, being December 17th, we made a recording. We took in a log file, which was actually an audio file from previous time, and a scanned image of the harvest details or the plant activities details that we had. So we have these three. So what we would like to do is that we can go back in here and say, all right, I want to create a report. And in order to create a report, this is what I'm going to do, create a date. So I will generate a new report. And let's say I want to create a new tabular report of some kind. And here I can see that I want to use these three files. Okay. So I want to use the audio files, the two different audio files, and this scanned image, the transcript of it. And from this, I want to create a report, whatever the report is for that day. So this is where the data capture and utility comes into play. So when I create a report, it says, do you want the software to tell you what template you want to use? And if you're not quite sure what template you want to call it, I can say go ahead and use a suggestion from that. And should I use a specific topic area? So if you're going to use a specific topic area, then I can say what it is in natural, spoken language. Or I could say, take all of those files, all of the transcripts, the full transcripts, and let the system, let the software decide on its own what it needs to do. And it says, all right, then in that case, I'll go ahead and use that. And it says, okay, I'm going to generate a custom report, not one of those NOP kind of a thing, and it says multiple file report is generated. Okay, that's good. So it also gave us a name, Comprehensive Agricultural Planting and Growth Report. So that's the name it came up with. We can add a date to it so that we don't forget that, and say that's December 17, 2025. We can add to that. And it also gives me a little description here that the report provides a detailed overview of planting activities, crop growth, and trial preparations, and so on. And it also now tells me that, hey, based on what you asked me to do, I'm going to create a tabular report set of criteria that says first column will be planting date. Okay. Second column would be what variety of crop are we dealing with. So plant names and so on. Column 3 is the dimension. That means where on the field, what are the dimensions of the plots or the fields that we're dealing with. Okay? And then the number of rows of that particular crop, any spacing that is needed, if there are any comments, whatever the comments, if there are being trialed, being executed. And if you need additional information, you can add additional columns. Or if you don't like any one of them, you can delete them. You can make it to improve the accuracy of that. So a number of things you can do. But at this point, I'm just saying I'm happy with what it gave me. I think they are, I have the things I need: planting date, what variety, the dimensions of the field over which that's being grown, and also if there are any comments associated with it. Okay. So now I can say, okay, generate this report. I mean, this is where we are going to rely upon the AI on the back end of it to actually take all of those transcripts that we have, extract the things that we want according to those column details that we specified. So it has the ability to go in there and pull it out. Otherwise, if you were to do manually, as in the past that we used to do, is to go through those scanned images and then come back with and says, hey, this is what we have. So we had, for the first file, we had this information. For the second file, we have the audio transcript that we used. For the third file, we had this little recording. So all these 3 files have been chosen to produce this report. So that report looks, so the planting date, variety, the number of rows. So a lot more details in here that you could actually see that as you expand that out, you get to see all of those different rates. So 15 rows of that. That's the data that we now have. So we can say, hey, I like this thing. Or if I don't like what it produced, I can tell the system, say, no, can you make it again, run it again, because it missed out something. Because after all, we are using AI to create this. So sometimes it gets lost. Just like an intern who doesn't know how to convert it. So it can be a little bit of in that case, you'd say, hey, redo it. And it'll redo it, and maybe another time, because what it does is that it learns. So it learns that, hey, what I produced for you is not quite what you wanted. So that's why you asked me to redo it. So when I redo it, and if you accept it, then that goes back into its learning routine, that the next time it won't make that mistake. Okay. So I have this data here that I can now say, hey, yeah, this is great. Let me go ahead and confirm it. And it says, okay, please review any necessary changes. So everything looks fine. So I have this report that I created here, and I know the dates and so on. So that's a comprehensive report. and it added a one at the end to say that it's the first report. Okay. So if I save that report, it gives me an option. Do you want the data that we saw on the previous page as tabular versions of it? Do you want that to be downloaded as a comma separated values so that you can pull it into your Excel sheets or wherever it is that you want to work with it? So if you're running a separate Excel sheet for whatever purpose, you could do that. Or you could just say, yeah, I'm done with it. Do you want to produce another report? In which case, you can bring in additional files to work on, so on and so forth. So let's say if it's done. So now you have that report. So this report is now available. You can always come back and say, what is the report? Puts back that report. Okay. So that is always available to you. And at any time, if you say, hey, oh, I forgot to download the data from that report, you can click on that, select that report, and now you say, yeah, I can do that. Okay. So this is reducing the overall time and effort needed to keep track of all of the data that you have. So that is first and foremost our main task at this level. Any idea of creating any of those predictive analysis, right? Saying, what should I plant next season? I can't do that unless I have information from the previous years. So this allows me to do that. And then either I may have bought a piece of software from somebody else who say, hey, I can do all this farm management and analytics. Can I feed this data into that? Yes, you can. Or as we are adding those features in our system, you could continue to use that. But the main task that I have for you that I have indicated in this case is I can pull in that data from wherever for that farm, pull that in, get those details, then run a report and create that. Okay. So if I wanted to create NOP forms, I can, which is generally needed for organic. So that's more of a guideline. But if you're dealing with a particular agency like IDLES or MOSA or CCOF or whoever it is, they have their own versions of those forms. So you can kind of incorporate those details into and then create the actual fulfillment of those forms as needed. And typically what you would do is that you would collect the data, scan the data, put it into the system on a regular basis. But the report generation, you may only want maybe once a week, once a month, or at the end of the season when you had to file for certification or compliance related areas and so on. But other than that, how often do you want to make a report? If you want to create a report every day, yes, you can. But that's something that as a farmer, you would know how often you want to do that. But any file, it's already here. One of the things that you would notice here is that every file has a created date. So everything that we do has a timestamp. So that allows you to create a trusted, verifiable information for whoever that you're working with. So, for example, maybe Whole Foods might want to know when was that harvest done? When did you harvested that? When did you harvest your crop before you? And when did you clean it? So any of those things are. So there are time-bound, time-stamped issues that you can always go back and say, I have details on it, and if you make a change, then that change would be another column that would be maintained. So you would have a running aspect of that timestamp. So that's one of the main things that we have. The other thing that you can do is that we are working on something called task list, which is generally, again, similar to what we had seen saying, can you create this task area? So this is not quite, it's still in work in progress. So generally, one of the things that we want to do is that you have people working on your field. You have either employees, interns, or yourself, and you want to schedule your task, your work. And that work saying that on what day, who will do what, right? And that may be something that you may have described, or you may, at the beginning of the shift or the beginning of the week, you might start having a meeting with your employees and say, okay, this week on Monday we will do this, Tuesday we will do this, and so on and so forth, and who will do those tasks and how, who is going to be responsible for that. So those kind of activity scheduling, if you have an audio of that you're keeping track of that, then you can bring in that audio and it'll convert that into a report similar to what we had seen in here. So that's a piece that we are still working on. And it will produce these kinds of reports that you can then go back and then talk about when it is done. So that formatting of that has to be done a little bit more. But otherwise, overall, this is the very basic part of the software that allows you to maintain a record. And of course, one of the few other things that you can do, for example, in here, if I chose to have a, uh, let's say, a piece here that I'm going to choose and say, this field within is a subfield that I want to keep track of, I can now do that. And that will create it as a, um, let's say this is a variety 2 or something. And it's a field. So uh, variety 2, choose a farm. I'm going to use the blueberries farm and the same address. So now it will be recorded as a hierarchically belonging to that farm, which is this whole set that we saw earlier. Okay. The whole thing is now titled as variety 2. So if you want to just maintain only information associated with that, then we can do the same thing that we did with the farm level. We can also do it with the subfield level, any of the data corresponding to that and so forth. So we can fine tune or drill down to the levels of details that you want to keep track of the data that you wanted to maintain. So that's another feature that we have here. So you can go all the way down to, you have a farm, you have a field, you have plots and subplots, and also including if you have like a greenhouse, you can maintain that as another uh, piece of that information under that whole farm hierarchy. And you can keep track of all the information coming into that and work with that. And even within these forms and reports, you can sort them by layout and other characteristics. Same thing with the files and logs. You can form by sorting, filtering, so that you can work with that. So that's in a nutshell what this application currently is capable of doing, is helping with the initial data assimilation. And this also works on your phone, whether it's an Android phone or an Apple phone. So when you get to the field where you don't have network connection, you may not have internet connection, you may not have Wi-Fi connection or any of those kinds of details. So you can use your device to capture, to make a scan of that page, to talk into it, and all of that will be stored locally on that device. And when you bring that device back into your main farmhouse where you may have connection, internet connection or Wi-Fi connection, it'll automatically be able to tell you, you are now in the vicinity, upload that or connect to it, and it'll go directly into the the actual location that you have. And you can, and which is what we showed you here. When I go in there and says, please assign to a land area, it says, because I had something that I had recorded when I was on a place where I didn't have access to network. So it'll do that. Then when I connect back, it says, hey, where do you want it to be connected to? So it doesn't want you, the system won't automatically connect it because it wants you to take control over that and says, assign it to a land area. So if this, um, so if I say, hey, I want to use this to assign it to that farm, then I can say, yeah, that farm, but on this, and assign it to that. So now whatever I did is now assigned to that. Okay? And I can confirm and say, and it says, yeah. and it says has identified one task. So this is more about converting with what should you do. So it creates a task. So it'll probably create the task in here that I can fill a report out of that. Okay. So that's generally what I have at this point to, and I'll answer any questions that any of you might have regarding this. So we have, I think it's about another 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. Just a couple questions. And again, if you have questions about any of this, go ahead and put them in either the chat box or the Q&A box. One that came up from an attendee is about the software itself. Is it a free software? What is the business plan for the company? Kind of just, Sree, just give us a rundown of that.
Sure, sure. So we have a 2 month free trial for the software so that you can try and see if it makes sense to you. And if it doesn't make any sense, if it doesn't save you anything, you don't have to use it, right? Uh, but otherwise, if you think that it is saving you, then we'd say that, hey, no, at this point, we are saying, a $25 per month subscription will help you continue to use that on a monthly basis, or you can actually take the yearly subscription at about $250. That's what currently we are hoping that we'd be able to do. But before you can commit, you should be able to try it for 2 months and see how it is helping you. And our feeling is that if it doesn't save you, don't pay. Okay?
Great. Is it currently available for people to do the 2 month trial or
Yes,
okay.
yes, it is available. So all you have to do is to send an email, and we will then set up an account for you with that email and the password. That we will send you a temporary password. You can always change that, and then it is yours. Nobody will see what you have.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one of the main things that we started with our privacy and trust as the primary point of use, because oftentimes this data is anybody in the organization can view. No, even I cannot see it. So once you start using it, only you can,
Okay.
unless you bring it up like the shared screen and say, hey, this didn't work, can you tell me why? Right?
Sure.
uh, but otherwise I don't get access to your data.
On the another question I had was on the reporting, the forms and reports, is it can you show us just kind of like what the options are for the if you have to do an NOP report or something like that?
Yes. So let's go into forms and reports and say there is a generate a new report here, and I can choose from any number of these different NOP forms associated with it.
Okay.
So cleaning inventory. So if I look at in terms of that particular one is a harvest instructions record, a harvest plan record, pick list, farmers market load, a harvest record. So let's see if this corresponded to some kind of a harvest record. Okay. So if I choose this, then um, select files to build. Okay. So it says I want to use these three to do that. And I can say generate that report. So now it's going to create that harvest record report according to that NOP form.
Okay.
So that's what it is going to do. And again, because we have, the test data is not fully compatible with all the things that that particular that form needs, it may only fill certain columns of that. So we will see how it does. But
Okay.
it does take that whatever that form's needs are, which is because we have certain specific columns associated with it. Earlier, when we are doing custom, it asks you, hey, do you want this column? Do you want this column? Do you want this column? So here, it's going to still give you that option to determine, but it says, hey, this is how it created that. So it took all of those fields, but it only did a few of these because it didn't fully have all the information for the
Mhm.
details. So it only, if I had everything that I was capturing information based on what I needed for those forms, then it'll properly do. So
Sure.
right now I did a very generic approach. So it only maintained the crops that are being
Yep. Yep.
harvested.
Yep. But if you had, taken a picture of your notepad with what your harvest date or anything like that, it would fill out more of those.
Correct. Yeah, because those NOP forms, typically what they do is that they give you that format and you can go in and add into that handwritten stuff. But
Hmm.
instead of keeping that handwritten stuff, now you can copy it and say, hey, now fill this into my regular electronic version of the form.
Okay, great. Uh, on the phone version, is
Yeah.
that just you're just logging in through the website and able to do that?
In the
Or
phone version, you're not logging into the website at all.
okay,
So it is a standalone.
okay,
The only time you logging in when there is a logging in requirement that says, okay, how do I log into the application? That login address and email and password and user ID is the same as the one that you would have for the desktop. So
okay.
it maintains that connection when you come in. When you bring that device back into your farmhouse, then it knows, yep, this is where I need to connect.
Okay. So yeah, so it's an application then that you download onto your phone.
Right.
Okay.
And that's a as part of the subscription you get it as a free app.
Okay. Great. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if any other questions come in, go ahead and put them in. But I think I think if everybody else that's watching this is like me, they're just kind of digesting it all and thinking about how they can use it on their operation. Uh, I know that just talking with you, I'm thinking about my operation where um, I don't have NOP report necessarily needed for
Mhm.
um, my livestock or anything like that, but I'm thinking about using it. How many hay bales do I put out? How many animals are in that? And so that then I can use that as an idea of, all right, this is the amount of forage that I need to go into the year. Or if I'm grazing, rotational grazing, this is the size of the paddock that I moved them to. This was the grass height when I moved them in. This was the grass height when I moved them out, and when I moved them out. And I can use this to make a report, not necessarily for certification, but just for my own understanding of managing my land.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
That is great. So yeah, thank you. I don't see any other questions in, so I just if anybody wants to get a hold of you, it's just bdisolutions.com.
No. So let me put that in the
Yeah.
chat.
Yes,
So
yes, do that. Yeah.
so I
And
can stop sharing and put it into the chat. You can reach us at SN at so that's my email that you can reach out to me on that. Or if you go to um,
yeah,
that is the website address where also you can go in and sign up or send an email through that. So they would have a contact page and contact information or send an email from that. Or if you want to directly reach out to me, that first one. So
great. Yeah, absolutely. And I will add those in an email. We'll send out a email afterwards, and when the webinar is available, if you want to check that out and reach out to the team at Big Data in a Box or Sree personally, that is awesome. Sree, I
yeah.
do absolutely just want to say thank you. It
Yeah.
was
So if you needed to know what my name, that's my name.
that's right. There you go.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you so much for coming on. I do want to just really quick thank our main thing here is the that allows us to do these right now is the transition to organic partnership program. So Before we go, I just want to say a little bit about that. If you are interested in transitioning to organic, or you know neighbors that are interested in transitioning to organic, we do still have a mentorship program going on that we'll be doing, and through this transition to organic partnership program, we are able to put on things like these webinars and field days. So again, thank you for all attending. We did get a quick question that just popped in. So
Yeah.
Sree, before we go, let's make sure we get this one. What programs will this take information from? So Access, Excel, Paperport, what kind of documents can you upload?
Most of the typically used documents. I mean, if you currently we think that if you have an Excel sheet, it's already processed and compared. The AI cannot do much with that at this point to bring it in. So we would say that okay, you can bring it in as a document, uh, convert that into PDF, and you can bring it in. Then we can but then that's uh, doing the same thing. It's like regurgitating the same food.
Sure, sure.
But as we get into more of this predictive analytics side of it, then you can link to those kinds of Excel files automatically and say, hey, yeah, you already have an Excel file, you have information coming from, let's say, market information. So those are external data that we can integrate into any analytics component. So at this point, we are focusing on just getting the typical kinds of data gathering that farmers are using and bringing that in. So we are helping, for example, one of the farmers who has both handwritten documents. There's the book that I showed you, the scan, and
Mhm.
and the farmer also has converted that into an Excel sheet. So we are using both, but for one purpose, saying that if when we transform that scanned image sheet to corresponding data, that we can verify that the data is exactly the same that farmer had on the Excel sheet. And as long as we are proving that, so right now that's what we're using it for. But what we could in as we move along to bring in those as supplementary data.
Great. That is awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here for data. Just as you were going through the things, I'm thinking about organic farms that I visited, and how they can structure everything. They can have their fields, they can have their plots, they can change those from year to year.
Mhm.
I think it's a lot of great stuff. So everyone, thank you for joining. Sree, thank you for hosting for us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank